Let's see why Paul is still the greatest and manages to make 70-foot putts look like it's nothing. All right, so you might be thinking Paul didn't have the greatest year, or he was really kind of falling off. But if you look at his standings, he did amazing. He didn't necessarily win every tournament, but he was in contention in a lot more than you might guess. So going over his year, first at WACO, second at Belton, second at Jonesboro, second European Open, second at Ledgestone, and obviously first at Worlds. And then he went 16 under course record at Champions Cup final round. So this is not the year of somebody that's that washed or is playing a lot worse. There's just a lot more competition. And even though there's a lot more parity in the field, he is still showing himself to be above and beyond a player that is uniquely skilled at disc golf and has more shot selections than pretty much anyone else. And I think the shot right here is a great example of that. It is a little bit Simon-esque in that it just looks like a crazy, crazy shot, and then he just parks it. And I think this is where Paul is going to become one of the greats. Obviously, he's great now, 6-time world champ. But I think that's where he's going to really shine, because the courses are going to become crazier and crazier, and you have to hit very narrow gaps. And I think that's something that you can see in a lot of these highlights. Over and over, Paul is hitting very narrow gaps that you can tell he's aiming for very precisely. And that is pretty much what got him the win at WACO. I think it's just such a strong win. Like, I know WACO isn't the very first event, but it feels like the first big one. So when he won that, I thought everyone was thinking like, yeah, he might be like winning 5, 6, 7 events this year. Obviously he didn't do that, but he still performed really, really well. And I know Belton might not seem like the greatest, but I still think it's a very unique course. It offers a lot of cool challenges. And Paul getting a 465-foot forehand is just so cool to look at. Like, I know it's kind of like the standard on tour, but you just don't think of Paul as like a distance player, but he still shows himself to be a great, great forehand player. And then we have Jonesboro. I think there was a lot of chances where Paul could have choked, but he just makes so many long putts here. And that is what got him this near win if he didn't necessarily trip on his playoff holes. And he got 2 eagles on 16. That is just absurd, especially when you look at his final round, which we'll get to soon. And I have actually been on this course. Hole 1 is no joke. For him to park that is just absolutely absurd. So here we have the most insane upshot to get his eagle. I do not know how he can get such a narrow gap, because it is nearly impossible to even get over the lake, not necessarily get into position to make his eagle putt. And then this is to go into playoffs. We're not going to go over his playoffs because he didn't do that great. But all right, European Open. This is just a great example of how Paul manages to make narrow, long gaps over and over and over. And then he makes another eagle putt. But it just shows that, yes, eagle has an amazing amount of accuracy. But Paul is showing up, getting almost identical to eagle, and hitting his long putts again and again. And if you look at his putts, they have a very consistent behavior to them that I didn't actually notice until I looked at these clips. Here we have some more Paul magic that I just cannot imagine. So he hits it a little bit high, and I think that's his way of committing on every single putt. You normally would want to go like dead center, but he throws it a little bit high, so that if it does hit anything, it's going to be hitting band. And I think that's a really cool way of putting, and that's kind of how I perform my best, is shooting high. And then it allows you to make putts like these, where you just wouldn't have the amount of power if you were putting dead straight. Here is a great example of how Paul hits his upshots again and again. And if he is at all off, he will make his comeback putts. You can just see the amount of confidence that he has, and his, once again, Simon lines that make no sense, but he still manages to get his birdies. So the real question is, will we see a season like this again next season with Paul, or will he be a better or worse player? I'm thinking he will actually win more events than he did this year. I know there's going to be a lot more competition, even more so next year, but I think with Paul becoming even more dialed, knowing that his foundation is in a good place, I think he'll become a lot more intense and more focused than he was last year, which was already pretty intense and pretty focused. But it's still hard to say because I think when you become this amount of like well-versed in disc golf, there's only so much room for improvement that you can get. But I think that will be what is required. I think, so yeah, those putts just make no sense. He just hits it again and again. And then his forehand is so smooth. No one ever talks about Paul's forehand. And then it almost aces at a major. And here we see more Simon lines that hit an insane tree gap. It makes no sense how he can do that. And then we have the Worlds. I was actually at this event for a day or two. And yeah, Jones is no joke. Every single shot has very, very aggressive OBs that you can see on camera, but you don't necessarily fully know how intense it is. And I think if you looked at Paul's performance round 1 and 2 here, it looked pretty good, but I mean, there was just not a whole lot of confidence that Paul was going to make it work because everyone else was just playing lights out and there was just so much competition. But like Paul does, he does not give up. He shows up again and again in the later rounds when everyone else is a little bit gassed. He still performs. And he makes his putts so consistently. And here's another example of how Paul has this insane forehand that you just never see. I don't know why we never see it, but it's so good. And then we have one of the best putts of all year besides final round. And I was actually there on the bottom left corner, and I was shocked because that is such a far uphill putt. And on hyzer angle, it is just crazy, crazy stuff. And then we have some more Paul magic. I don't know how he does it. Goes through the gate.
Yes.
Rolls in a great position. And then he capitalizes, of course, makes his birdie putt because he is just the GOAT still. So I think Paul still has some room to improve. I mean, obviously because he didn't win every event. But you can see his consistency might be lacking a little bit, but when he's confident, he is making that putt. And when he needs to, he will hit the most narrow line for a 450-foot backhand. And then obviously make one of the greatest putts of all time. And another thing that when you look at this, I just don't think this putt looks like it's going to go in, but then it drops perfectly. And I think this just shows Paul has the repetition, the confidence to know that that putt's going to go in. I think at that moment, you also knew that Gossage just wasn't going to win. Even if it went in playoff, it just wasn't going to happen for Gossage. Because it was such a solid shot. And that is how Paul got his 6th world title. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I am still shocked that he managed to get his 6th, and good for him. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, make sure you subscribe. Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.
World champion.